Hello, this is Nightline and I'm Raymond. News making the headlines. Inflation unchanged at 4%. Food group the highest contributor. Sabah latest state to be affected by floods. Good morning. Malaysia's inflation rate stood at 4% in November this year, unchanged from the preceding month. The Department of Statistics Malaysia DOSM said the Consumer Price Index CPI for last month stood at 129 versus 124 in November last year. Inflation for the food group increased by 7.3% and remained the main contributor to inflation. Core inflation registered an increase of 4.2% in November versus the same month the previous year, with the highest increase recorded by the food and non-alcoholic beverages group. 4 states recorded increases above the national inflation level of 4%, namely Putrajaya, Selangor, Sarawak and Johor, while Labuan recorded the lowest increase at 2.4%. In the meantime, Economy Minister urged consumers to play a role in making supply and demand for goods more elastic, including by not buying products that are sold at high prices. Rafizi Ramli said if consumers do not buy or use products offered at unreasonable prices, it will push traders and suppliers not to arbitrarily increase the price of goods. Rafizi stressed that even though the price of goods continues to rise, some consumers were willing to pay the price set by suppliers. He explained one category of expenditure that affects inflation the most is the price of food and non-alcoholic beverages, which is the largest expenditure to households.
Bukan boycott, you don't have to buy. Sebab dia banyak pilihan sebenarnya kan dekat satu kawasan besar, especially kalau kita bercakap pasal makanan. Kalau tengok kepada pecahan inflasi kan yang betul-betul mendorong inflasi dan juga perasaan kita bahawa harga barang ni naik ialah barang makanan. Dan barang makanan ni pula 11% ialah yang kita beli yang dah siap masak kat luar.
He said this in a media conference on the publication of the November 2022 Consumer Price Index in Putrajaya on Friday. Rafizi also said efforts to control inflation require the cooperation of all parties, from the government, traders to the people. He added that the relevant ministries are now actively developing immediate measures to remedy the value chain on the supplier side to ensure that the prices do not rise with sufficient supply. Meanwhile, Rafizi revealed that a mechanism that would allow subsidies to be distributed in a targeted manner and fairly to eligible recipients could be developed next year. He said the government is hoping to expedite a proper rollout of a sophisticated and, if possible, index-based targeted subsidy system in order to reallocate resources from blanket subsidy that is tied to disposable income, household size and consumption. Meanwhile, Singapore's core inflation stood at 5.1% in November, unchanged from October. According to the Monetary Authority of Singapore, this was due to smaller increases in the costs of services, electricity and gas. They were broadly offset by a steeper pickup in the costs of retail, as well as other goods and food. The central bank's monitoring of core inflation measures excludes the components of accommodation and private transport. These items are excluded as they tend to be significantly influenced by supply-side administrative policies and are volatile. In the meantime, Japan's inflation has hit a 4-decade high, raising pressure on the central bank to roll back its massive stimulus. According to data released by Japan's Internal Affairs Ministry on Friday, prices rose at their fastest pace since 1981 in November, fueled in part by higher energy costs. The country's core consumer price index, CPI, which excludes volatile fresh food prices, climbed 3.7% last month compared with a year earlier. The prices jumped the most for processed food items and were also higher for electricity and durable goods like air conditioners. It was the biggest rise since a 4% jump in December 1981, when inflation was still high from the impact of the 1979 oil shock and a booming economy. Prime Minister Datuk Sri Anwar Ibrahim on Friday joined about 1,000 congregants to perform Solat Hajat for the people, as well as the country's well-being and protection from flood disaster. The prayers was held right after the Friday prayers led by Imam Ahmad Fakhruddin Tahir at the Saidina Othman Ibnu Affan Mosque in Bandar Tun Razak in Kuala Lumpur. Also present was Minister in the Prime Minister's Department for Religious Affairs, Datuk Muhammad Naim Mokhtar. During the Friday sermon, Fakhruddin reminded the congregants the importance of staying vigilant and being prepared at all times, as well as to take the opportunity to lend a helping hand to flood victims. Earlier, Datuk Sri Anwar also had a quick lunch at the popular Sup Meletup stall at Bandar Sri Permaisuri Food Court, not far from the mosque, and also mingled with the locals. Bandar Tun Razak is the parliamentary constituency represented by his wife, Datin Sri Dr. Wan Aziza Wan Ismail. Sabah is the latest state to be affected by floods, while Selangor and Pahang have fully recovered as of Friday night. The overall flood situation in the country is also showing improvements, with the number of evacuees continuing to decrease. As at 10 p.m., more than 35,000 flood victims have been relocated to relief centres in all 6 states affected by floods. According to the Info Bencana JKM portal, the number of evacuees in Terengganu dropped to 17,690 people, housed in 111 relief centres in 8 districts. In Kelantan, the number of victims decreased to 17,298 in 48 relief centres. Over in Sarawak, the number of flood evacuees dropped slightly to 301 victims in 8 relief centres compared to 305 earlier. As for Perak, the number of evacuees at 2 relief centres rose slightly to 69 people compared to 51 people earlier. In Sabah, the number of victims also decreased to 63 people, housed in 1 relief centre in Kota Belud. While in Johor, the State Disaster Management Committee said the number of evacuees in the Segamat district decreased to 32 people, and all of them are being housed at 1 relief centre. In the meantime, the Defence Ministry is ready to increase assets and personnel in the east coast of the peninsula if the flood situation worsens. Its Minister Datuk Sri Muhammad Hassan said increasing assets and personnel would hasten the evacuation of flood victims and the delivery of food supplies.
Itu boleh diberikan pertimbangan kerana negeri-negeri pantai timur ni memang banjir ni memang dia yearly affair kan. Jadi kekuatan anggota dan juga aset kita kalau nak perlu ditambah kita boleh tambah, tetapi sebenarnya untuk kita mobilisasi aset dan juga anggota ni dia tidak memakan masa. Kalau kita perlu daripada Melaka, daripada Negeri Sembilan, daripada semua kita boleh buat segera.
Datuk Sri Mohamad also said armed forces assets such as combat boats and 7-ton trucks have been very useful in flood operations as they can access disaster areas easily. So far, 28 officers and 539 personnel from the armed forces, including a total of 98 assets, have been mobilized nationwide. Datuk Sri Mohamad was met by reporters after visiting the SK Banggol Peradong Flood Evacuation Centre in Manir, Kuala Terengganu on Friday. Menteri Besar Datuk Sri Ahmad Samsuri Mokhtar has apologized to the people of Terengganu for being abroad when a second wave of floods hit the state from Sunday. He admitted that no explanation would be able to justify his absence when the people were being affected by the disaster during the critical period.
Pada pagi ini juga saya mengambil kesempatan untuk menyatakan rasa kesal saya yang tidak terhingga juga kerana saya tidak dapat bersama dengan mangsa-mangsa banjir di lapangan, terutamanya untuk tempoh daripada 18 hingga 21 hari bulan. Saya juga faham bahawa walau apa jua penjelasan yang saya berikan, penjelasan saya sudah tentu tidak bermakna apa-apa. Walau bagaimanapun, saya ingin sebut sebagai rekod bahawa saya teliti suasana yang berlaku mengenai banjir ini dari setiap masa.
Dato' Sri Ahmad Samsuri said this in a press conference which was uploaded on his Facebook page on Friday. He also said that he decided to continue his trip abroad after the first wave of floods from December 8th to 17th started to subside, but the second wave of floods occurred when he was already overseas. In another Facebook post, he announced that the Terengganu state government will give 1,000 ringgit in aid to the heads of households affected by the floods in the state to ease their burden in dealing with the natural disaster. He also said the state government will give 10,000 ringgit to the families of people who died in the floods, while other assistance, including for repairing and rebuilding damaged homes and infrastructure, will be implemented following a full assessment of the destruction. Earlier on Friday, Dato' Sri Ahmad Samsuri, who was slammed recently for being absent since floods struck the state last Sunday, visited the SK Binjai Flood Relief Centre in Chukai, Kemaman. After meeting flood victims, he attended a flood briefing by Kemaman District Disaster Chairman Ahmad Farhan Abdul Wahab at the district office. The massive floods that hit the east coast have claimed 5 lives so far, with a 3-year-old child in Terengganu being the first casualty. The Works Ministry has identified 94 locations in the country with damaged roads caused by floods and bad weather. Its Minister Dato' Sri Alexander Nanta Linggi said 42 federal roads and 52 state roads in 8 states, including Kelantan, Terengganu, Pahang and Negeri Sembilan, were on the list. According to Dato' Sri Nanta, of the 94 locations, 61 are affected by floods in several states, 19 involved collapsed slopes, 6 sunk roads, 5 collapsed roads and 3 damaged or collapsed bridges. He added that Terengganu and Kelantan were the most affected, with 6 districts each, followed by Pahang and Negeri Sembilan, with 4 districts each. Speaking during his visit to check the status of the flood-damaged roads in Kelantan on Friday, the minister also announced an emergency allocation for immediate repairs to the Kota Baru Kuala Terengganu Federal Trunk Road after it was inundated last Sunday.
Ini adalah sebanyak RM850,000 lah yang akan diperlukan nanti.
On repairs to the Kusial Bridge, where the soil under its structure had eroded because of the flooding, Dato' Sri Nanta said the costs were still being assessed and repairs will begin as soon as possible. However, the bridge is still safe for use because it does not involve structural damage. He added that the Public Works Department and concession companies will also closely monitor the bridge. Christmas this Sunday would be wet and cold, as the Malaysian Meteorological Department, Met Malaysia, has come out with a rainy forecast. The department said that in the morning, rain is expected for most parts of Sabah, including the interior, the west coast, Kudat and Sandakan, as well as Labuan. In a post on Facebook on Friday, Met Malaysia said that thunderstorms and rain were forecast in the morning in a few areas, namely coastal Pahang and East Johor and Sarawak. Rain is also expected in the evening at over most of Sabah in the interior areas and the west coast, while there are thunderstorms and rain warnings in Perlis, Kedah, Pulau Pinang, Perak and Johor. Meanwhile, Met Malaysia has also issued an alert warning of continuous rain in several parts of Sarawak from Friday until Christmas Eve. The department said extremely heavy rain is expected in Kuching, Serian, Samarahan, Sri Aman and Betong, while a heavy rain forecast is made for Sarike, Sibu, Muka and Bintulu. A similar weather forecast is also expected in the Sabah interiors, involving Sipitang, Kuala Penyu and Beaufort West Coast. Met Malaysia said the public may log on to its official website for further information or call its hotline number. Winter storm threatens U.S. holiday travel. Stay tuned. We're back with news from the foreign front. The massive winter storm battering the United States with plunging temperatures coast to coast has left hundreds of thousands of homes and businesses without power. It has also prompted the cancellation of more than 5,000 flights, with two major airports in Chicago accounting for nearly 1,300 of the cancellations. The looming storm was forecast to develop into a bomb cyclone, unleashing heavy, blinding snow from the northern plains and Great Lakes region to the upper Mississippi Valley and western New York. At least 5 states, Kentucky, Missouri, Oklahoma, Georgia, and North Carolina, have already implemented emergency plans, and others are likely to follow. The storm has also brought damaging winds and freezing temperatures that can quickly lead to frostbite. A French serial killer who was responsible for multiple murder of foreign youth across Asia in the 1970s, Charles Gurumukh Sobhraj, has been freed after 20 years in jail. The court ordered 78-year-old Sobhraj, who had heart surgery in 2017, to be released on health grounds after serving more than 3/4 of his sentence. He was convicted over the murder of backpackers Connie Jo Bronzich and Laurent Carrier in Kathmandu in 1975. The notorious killer was dubbed the Serpent or the Bikini Killer for his knack for deceptive disguises, ability to escape prison, and tendency to target young women. Prior to his 2 convictions in Kathmandu, Sobhraj had already spent 2 decades in jail in India for poisoning a busload of French tourists. In Pakistan, at least 1 police officer was killed and 6 others injured in a suicide car bombing at a checkpoint in Islamabad on Friday. The bombing took place near police headquarters on a main road that leads to government buildings housing the country's parliament and high offices. Authorities said the blast happened when police officers spotted the car and ordered the driver to halt for routine checking. Instead of stopping, the driver detonated explosives hidden inside. The 6 injured included 4 police officers and 2 civilians. The Pakistan Taliban claimed responsibility for the blast, saying the attack was in retaliation for the recent killing of a senior member. sports football, the Australian A-League. Western Sydney Wanderers failed to reach top spot in the standings after they were held to a 1-1 draw by Brisbane Roar on Friday. The Wanderers took the lead in the 18th minute when Brendan Borello's cutback cross was finished off by Oliver Bozanic. Brisbane had to wait till 2 minutes after the hour mark to equalise. Carlo Armiento completing a fine solo run with a tipping shot that left Western's keeper with no chance. The 1-1 scoreline remained till the final whistle, putting Western in second with 15 points, one behind leaders Melbourne City, with Brisbane stuck in fifth with 11 points. Moving on to basketball, the NBA. CJ McCollum scored a season-high 40 points as the New Orleans Pelicans beat the San Antonio Spurs 126-117, ending their 4-game losing streak. The Pelicans led by as many as 23 points and opened the fourth quarter with a 19-point lead. The Spurs got back into the game with a 10-0 run fueled by Stanley Johnson, who scored 9 of his 12 points in the final period. McCollum, however, almost single-handedly kept the Spurs at bay. His floater off the glass was the first of his 19 points in a pivotal 7-minute stretch. The individual scoring outbursts included 4 threes, one while McCollum was fouled for a 4-point play. Jonas Valanciunas had 16 points and 10 rebounds for the Pelicans, while Jeremy Sochan scored a career-high 23 points for San Antonio, with Trey Jones adding 19 points and Josh Richardson had 14. Still to come, former national footballers acquitted of corruption charges. Stay with us. Nightline continues. The Seremban High Court on Friday acquitted and set aside a 3-year prison sentence and 50,000 ringgit fine each imposed on former footballers Khairul Anwar Baharum and G. Prem Kumar. The duo were previously found guilty by the Sessions Court 2 years ago on 2 charges of offering bribes for match-fixing football matches in 2017. Judge Datin Rohani Ismail made the decision after allowing the appeals submitted by both accused. The court also ordered that the fine and bail money paid by the men be returned to them. On August 17, 2020, the duo, aged 48 and 54, were convicted of offering 10,000 ringgit bribes to a player and a goalkeeper from the Malaysian Indian Football Association MIFA team. The bribes were offered as inducement to fix a match for MIFA to lose 2-0 to the Perak State Development Corporation, PKNP, which took place on April 7, 2017. The offence was committed on March 27, 2017 at Senawang Light Industrial Area in Seremban. The charge under the Malaysian Anti-Corruption Commission (MACC) Act provides for a maximum prison sentence of 20 years and a fine of not less than 5 times the value of the bribe or 10,000 ringgit, whichever is higher. The Prego Mushroom Carbonara Creamy Pasta Sauce, weighing 665 grams, with batch number of 2022081716, has been recalled due to errors in its processing. Following this, Health Director General Tan Sri Dr. Noor Hisham Abdullah called on the public to be wary and for sellers to take the product off their shelves. In a statement on Friday, Tan Sri Dr. Noor Hisham pointed out that the pasta sauce was produced in Malaysia with an expiry date of August 17, 2023. He also said the manufacturer's recall was made when it was discovered that products in the batch were defective, including having an unpleasant smell, color change, water appearance, and separate layers of liquid. Tan Sri Dr. Noor Hisham stated that the Ministry, through the Food Safety and Quality Division, had also received a notification from the manufacturer on the matter. He said the division is currently monitoring the product recall process, adding that sellers must stop selling the product immediately. He also urged consumers to take precautions before consuming food to prevent poisoning and to contact the Ministry for any information regarding the issue. In Rome, a building designed by Donato Bramante has been invaded by multicolored artificial hair, neon lights and sculptures. The exhibition, entitled Crazy: Madness in Contemporary Art, took over the indoor and outdoor spaces of the cloister and turned them into unusual settings to display contemporary works in which visitors can immerse themselves. Let's take a look at the visuals as we wrap up Nightline this time around. With that, I'm Raymond Goh. Thank you for your company and have a safe weekend.